Brian, your colleague Michael Wallace reporting this morning that Dwyane Wade is still dealing with lingering injuries that forced him to miss 8 of the team's last 15 games, requiring treatment in recent days for knee and leg soreness. How much is that affecting him?
Well, I think you don't have to be an expert to see that Dwyane Wade's jump shot is really struggling. He's only shooting 31% in this series. And last night you could see he was having trouble moving, having trouble getting back on defense, defensive rotations. And the jump shot was hitting the front of the rim, which is a classic symptom for somebody who's dealing with a little bit of lift issues. I think it absolutely had something to do with his worst playoff game in his career. I can't quite tell how serious this injury is because the Heat are purposely not talking about it, but they are hoping that these 2 days off between now and Game 4 on Sunday will help him out in that regard, in that area.
In the third quarter, he had an angry exchange during a timeout with Erik Spoelstra as the Pacers won a 17-3 run, tempers flaring. If you can, put that relationship and that particular incident in perspective for us.
Well, Erik has known and worked with Dwyane for 9 years now. When Dwyane first came to the Heat, he was an assistant coach, and they've had a long-standing relationship. It's changed as Erik has become the head coach. What was interesting about that situation, I mean, Erik downplayed it, saying, you know, you have these incidents throughout the season where you get into arguments and whatnot, and it's part of any NBA season. But what's interesting about that was how Dwyane also blew off several other teammates. We all saw him push Erik Spoelstra away and tell him, you know, he didn't want to talk to him anymore. But he did the same with Juwan Howard, LeBron James, and Mario Chalmers after that incident with Spoelstra. It wasn't until Udonis Haslem came over to him in another timeout a few minutes later that anybody was really able to talk to him. And, of course, he's been teammates with Udonis Haslem for 9 years as well.
Right. They won a championship together. I bet that was very uncharacteristic behavior on the part of Dwyane Wade. And meanwhile, they very much miss Chris Bosh in that lineup. He can't move Roy Hibbert away from the basket. Hibbert has just been a force there in the middle. What are the chances that Bosh, who's suffering from that abdominal injury, could make it back for this series?
Hannah, I would say less than 5%. The Heat really are hoping he could just make it into the middle of the next round if they're able to come back here in advance. The injury that he's got requires rest for at least a 2-week period. So I don't even think he's going to be cleared to even do any running before the potential end of this series.
What are the implications if this team loses the series? What's the possibility that some member of the Big Three might be traded? We just heard Stephen A. Smith say that Pat Riley is not averse to that thought.
Well, I think you have to look at what's going on with the whole league and with the team. They're having an awful lot of difficulty with the guys they've signed to be the supporting cast for their All-Stars. Shane Battier is struggling. Udonis Haslem had a serious foot injury last year and is in the midst of the worst season of his career. Mike Miller has dealt with injuries since he came to the Heat, already having 4 surgeries, and he's got ankle issues right now, amongst other things. These guys who they've brought in, they're not helping. And with the way the rules are set up, it's going to be very difficult for the Heat to be a player in free agency or to make a significant trade. The best way they can improve this team without making major additions through the draft, because they've traded away all their draft picks, is to make a trade with one of the Big Three. And if they don't have a championship team, which they may not, they have to seriously examine that, and that's something I think that would happen if they didn't get through this series and didn't win a championship this year.
Bosh, Wade, LeBron, who's more likely to get dealt?
Well, I don't think you're trading the MVP. Okay, and I think if you look at Chris Bosh, that's a big man, and you'd have to find, you'd have to break the 20 if you understand, and you may not be able to get an all-star in return, but you'd have to get a big man and maybe a guard, and then you have Dwyane Wade, who, in a vacuum, you may say that would be a guy who's the oldest of the 3, who's struggling a little bit with his game, having some injury issues at this point in his career. Could you maybe look to move him? But he's the most popular player in the history of the franchise, and already there's a banner hanging in the arena that he brought. So very difficult dynamic, and if the Heat struggle and do not get out of the series or do not get to the finals, these are going to be very fascinating conversations come in June and July.